Hello everyone, this video is going to discuss the difference between intramembranous ossification and endochondral ossification. We are first going to discuss the intramembranous ossification, and before we do that, I want to mention that both ossification processes have to start out with some type of connective tissue precursor. So I'm just going to write the start here. You know what? Sorry, I just want to write smaller so we can fit everything in here. Okay, so our start, we have to have some type of connective tissue precursor. So what is that going to be for our intramembranous ossification? It is going to be that membranous connective tissue, right? And what that is going to be our fun revisit to chapter 4, dense, irregular connective tissue. Okay, so that's where our bone is going to start out from, this dense, irregular connective tissue. And where we're going to find this type of tissue to go through intramembranous ossification is within our flat bones. So that's why I have this great little picture over here of the fetal skull. This is at about 8 weeks. Okay, and I want you to just, let's think of this frontal bone or parietal bone, whatever one is your favorite here. But we're also going to have this process going through to develop the mandible and also the diaphysis of our clavicle. So how do we start out doing this? Well, we have this dense irregular connective tissue, and within this connective tissue, we are going to have those kind of spindle, star-shaped mesenchymal cells. And remember, these mesenchymal cells can become whatever they want, right? So they are first going to become those, I'm just going to put osteogenic progenitor cells. Then they are going to turn into osteoblasts. And we know that our osteoblasts are going to start to secrete matrix. Okay, so here are my little osteoblast guys, and they start secreting their bone matrix all around them, right? Okay, now keep in mind that this bone matrix right now is not calcified. We don't have any crystals in here. So I'm just going to put uncalcified matrix, which is also known as osteoid, which I think I mentioned to some of you guys in tutoring. So if you come across that term, you know what it is. Okay, so what's happening now is that we are going to start to have some of these osteoblasts become trapped within the matrix. And so what are they going to become? They become osteocytes. And at this point, they get some kind of signal, and really the osteocytes kind of look very similar to the osteoblasts. We're going to fill this all in with matrix anyway. So, but now at this point, this matrix gets the signal. It gets the alkaline phosphatase enzyme to start bringing in calcium crystals, and this bone matrix is now going to be calcified. Calcified bone matrix. Okay, so basically what we've created here now is going to be our spongy bone. Spongy bone created. Hooray! Okay, so what we want to do is keep building bone. So what we can do is cause the spongy bone to turn into compact bone. And do you guys remember how this happens? It was that video I showed in class of that bone kind of moving around the blood vessel. So I can't remember if I posted it as a link on Blackboard, but I will make sure it is up. So at this point, what's happening is we have our spongy bone, right, where our ossification center was, which I forgot to mention that we have to have our blood supply come in, right, into this area. So I'm going to put blood vessel, BV, to create our ossification center. So we have, let's say, an ossification center here. So we have some spongy bone in this area, and then I've got some spongy bone in this area, okay? And these are really called spicules. Okay, and what they do is they start converging together, and they're going to make one nice piece like this, and then we get maybe we had a blood vessel here, so I'm going to put BV again for blood vessel, and what it starts to do is it is going to create an osteon around this blood vessel, BV. So this will kind of look a little bit more, let me see if I can draw this correctly, like this, where that blood vessel is in the middle. And basically what we're doing is creating an osteon around that blood vessel. Okay. Now this is also going to, at this point we have created our compact bone. So I'm going to put a C here. Spongy bone in the middle. Okay. And we'll say compact bone on the other side. This is my flat bone, right? But if I needed to kind of create more of a medullary cavity in here for my red bone marrow, I would use those cells that help with bone remodeling. And if you remember, that's going to involve our osteoclasts and osteoblasts. Okay, osteoclasts are first going to get rid of some of the bone here, and then we can have osteoblasts build new bone where we need it. Maybe we need it more on the outside here, the periphery of the bone, rather than inside, so we can widen through appositional growth. Okay, so I hope this video made sense as far as intramembranous ossification. Now let's dive into endochondral ossification. Okay, so here we go with endochondral ossification. So if you remember from the beginning portion of the screencast, we said that all ossification methods has to start with some type of connective tissue precursor. Oops, CT precursor. Okay. And in intramembranous ossification, that was membranous connective tissue, which is dense, irregular connective tissue, right? But in this instance, because we're doing endochondral ossification, we are going to have cartilage, chondral cartilage. So specifically, it will be hyaline cartilage. Okay. And that's what we are going to have in our starting process over here. This hyaline cartilage is serving as a cartilaginous bone model for our body, so that we know exactly where we need to lay in our bone. So this in blue is all hyaline cartilage. Now surrounding that cartilage, what do you think we're going to have here? This is my perichondrium. And interestingly enough, this is made up of dense, irregular connective tissue. That sounds a little familiar, right? Similar to our intramembranous ossification. So, similar to that process, we are going to have some mesenchymal cells in here or near the perichondrium. Okay, so there are my mesenchymal cells. And remember, they can become whatever they want to be, right? So at this point, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit and talk about how this took place. We had some mesenchymal cells here, and what they did is they turned into chondroblasts, which we know would secrete cartilage matrix. Okay, so we secreted that cartilage matrix, shaped the bone to be bone of how we want it to be, and we have our perichondrium that took place here too, but we left these portions open because this is where we want our articular cartilage to be, which is made up of hyaline cartilage. So that's why we have an open space over there. Now, our perichondrium, right around the area of the diaphysis, we are going to start to form a bone collar in that area. And what this collar does, well, what we're going to do is we're going to have some of these mesenchymal cells turn into osteoblasts, right? And that's what's going to cause the bone collar to appear. So I am going to change this up over here. We're going to make this the bone collar. Okay. So what this bone collar is doing is it starts to kind of compress. Kind of like think when you are wearing a collar to a button-up shirt, how you feel a little, I don't know, at least I do. If I button it up all the way, I feel a little claustrophobic, like it's cutting off my circulation. You want to open it up, lay loose, right? So what it's doing is it's compressing and it cuts off diffusion of nutrients to this hyaline cartilage. And so what's going to happen, we'll put of nutrients here, what's going to happen if we don't get nutrients or blood supply to our cartilage? Those chondrocytes within the cartilage are going to die. Okay, so then what happens is we get a release of calcified cartilage matrix. Meaning they have some calcium crystals within them. And while this is all happening, we get some signal in the body, go with brown, for help. Okay, so I like to think of this, I'm sure we have some Game of Thrones fans out there, we're going to call this Game of Bones. Dun, 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 dun. I'm probably not even singing that right. Anyway, what's happening is we are having an area, right? All of the people are dying, which happens in Game of Thrones quite a bit, but all of these chondrocytes are dying. And what happens is somebody called for help, okay? Somebody called for help. And so help is going to arrive, and it arrives in the form of a periosteal bud. Well, we actually have quite a few different terms that people use. We have periosteal bud, we have periosteal capillaries, perforating blood vessels. It's all referring to the same thing. What it means is we are going to have a blood vessel start to invade into this tissue. This is my blood vessel or capillary, however you want to say it. Okay. So, Our periosteal bud comes. Great, we have nutrients, but along with them, they have an alliance to some osteogenic cells. And these osteogenic cells are going to turn into osteoblasts. Now, do you think these osteoblasts are going to want to help out the chondroblasts and chondrocytes to make it into cartilage? No, it has its own agenda. It wants to create bone matrix, right? And so we have to say the winner here is osteoblasts, and they are going to invade that calcified cartilage and lay down the beautiful bone matrix and create spongy bone. So it creates its spongy bone, okay? All from that bone collar and that blood vessel coming in. So that makes this the first ossification center there. That's your first ossification center. Okay, so we've got our spongy bone in place, and what's going to happen next is we're going to work on creating these epiphyses, the proximal and distal epiphyses. And we also need to start working on our medullary cavity here in the diaphysis. So how are we going to do that? Well, within the epiphyses here, we are going to start to create our secondary ossification centers. So I'm just going to put a second here. And this is really going to happen after birth. After birth. I know, it's amazing. Our bones aren't completely formed yet after we're born. So this first part may be done, but the second part needs work. And so we get more blood vessels going over to the epiphysis, distal and proximal, and that creates our secondary ossification center. So we are going to, with those blood vessels, have these osteogenic cells come in again, turn into osteoblasts, secrete bone matrix, and we get spongy bone in that area. At this point, our original cartilage model is now basically turned into bone, except for we left a little bit of articular cartilage at the top, and then we're also leaving some space, I'll block this out here, some space in here between this epiphysis and the diaphysis, and also the distal epiphysis and the diaphysis. And this space here is going to be that epiphyseal plate, right? Which, if you link back to the two types of growth that we have within bone, appositional and interstitial, this stays as hyaline cartilage so that we can go through interstitial growth of bone. Okay. All right. The last thing we need to mention is after we go through our bone growth phase, so we are now entering adulthood, this plate, epiphyseal plate, is now going to turn into an epiphyseal line. And at that point, what's happening is that primary ossification center is fusing with our secondary ossification centers. Okay, so it's going to turn it into bone. We are not going to have any more cartilage sitting within this plate within adulthood. The only hyaline cartilage that we will have within this long bone will be the articular cartilage that will sit on top. So I know this was a little bit lengthy, but hopefully it gave a little bit clearer picture as to how this process takes place. So if you are still unsure about a certain phase of this process or intramembranous ossification, please contact me at any time.